you, it does, it does. It's just that this is a very non-ordinary presentation, and I need to see the speaker notes. I usually don't. I'm whispering so that you won't hear. Thank you, and I'm sorry. That's better. Oh, no. Okay, I'm good. I'm assuming I can start because the room is very, very quiet. So, hello. My name is Gil Tayar. I'm from Israel. I'm from Wix, from the Israeli offices. I am what is called a software architect, which in Wix means that I'm a developer with experience that handles big projects, which I do. Um, my experience goes really, really way back, probably before most of you were born. I started developing at the age of 13, which means around 83, 84, and haven't stopped since. I've seen everything from mainframes, mini computers, all the way up to the web and mobile, and I love developing. So I hope you will share my I hope you share my passion. But you've probably all heard of Wix. Just a little bit, if you haven't, Wix is a company that builds a website that helps people build websites. So you go in, you log in, you drag and drop your way onto a website, and then you publish it, and there you are. You have a fully working website on the web without needing to program. We have like 70 million users worldwide. Um, about 2 million of them pay money, which is how Wix makes the money that it makes, and all the beers that are in the back, um, and which nobody seems to be drinking. um, can I get a beer? I will probably need water or beer, so beer is better. That way the presentation will improve as I talk. Thank you. Um, where was I? Okay, so Wix, beautiful technology, a beautiful development methodology. This is our offices in Ukraine. We are hiring. If you're good, please come and talk to us. But you're not here to talk to learn about me. You're not even here to learn about Wix. You are here for a vision of yeah, please. Beer is how can I have a vision if there's no beer? Um, you are here for a vision of backend and frontend. Unfortunately, people may not have told you. I told Natalia, and she said, just continue. I do not have any vision whatsoever. I was asked to do this talk, to do a talk, and I said, oh well, I have an idea, and I gave them the title and I gave them the abstract, and they said, cool, that sounds nice. There was another talk that I wanted to give about ES6 modules, but no, they said we want this talk. So okay, so I sit down on my PowerPoint and I write this slide. This is easy. And the next slide just doesn't come up. I have no idea what the fuck I was thinking about. Um, so okay, this thing happens. Next evening, same thing happens. I put my kids to sleep. I go to my PowerPoint, actually Google Slides, but you get the point. And same thing happens. Evening after evening after evening after evening, I'm crying. I'm desperate. And the night of my flight, the day of my flight, everybody's gone from the house. I'm packing, and I know I'm fucked. I'm basically fucked. Nobody will invite me anymore to this beautiful, beautiful country. Um, so I pray. I am an atheist, as probably most of you Soviet influenced people are. I am an atheist, but I prayed. I prayed to Ada Lovelace, and I prayed to Grace Hopper. I prayed to Bill Gates because it's money, and I prayed for balance to Linus Torvalds or whatever he's called. I prayed to Brian Kernighan, and I prayed to Dennis Ritchie, the inventors of the C language. There's a Ken Thompson over there also. I prayed to all those gods, and nothing. And then, just as I was about to leave for the airport, a knock on the door, and I open it, and there's this guy. We're desert people in Israel, so he has a galabia like a Bedouin, and he's all caked with mud and dirt and like leaning on a stick, and he says, "You prayed?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I have your vision," and he pokes this thumb drive at me, the flash drive. This is your vision. This is your presentation. And he starts walking away, and I call after him, "What's your name?" And he says, "Paul." And I tell him, "What's in the presentation?" And he says, Don't open the presentation until the last minute, because if you do, it will do a Mission Impossible thing and just softly and silently explode. Well, not silently. And he disappears. Just fucking disappears on me. So I have no idea what this is about. Just as you do, I'm sorry if I've wasted your time, but let's see what he has. Maybe. I don't know. So this I wrote. Okay. And it has come to pass. It's all in the speaker notes. See, now you understand why. It has come to pass 26 years after the great prophet Tim Berners-Lee invented the holy tantric markup language, that a certain software developer by the name of Paul had a vision. Paul lived in a small village in the land of the web and was a software architect there. And while those around him called him an architect, he just liked to till the software soil, getting his hands dirty with codes and bugs and stuff. And in the land of the web, there were two tribes. The Backend tribe, who were an old and powerful tribe, and the Frontend tribe, who were a young tribe, but full of energy and passion. And the Backend tribe prayed to the Backend gods, and the Backend gods and the Backend tribe was happy, for the Backend gods rewarded their prayers with thread pools and message queues and Scala. But the Frontend tribe was not happy, for they had no gods, and they could not pray to the Backend gods, for the Backend gods could only understand words like thread pools and message queues and Scala. But they did not understand words like JavaScript and Angular and DOM. For they were old gods, and they did not understand this new language of the Frontend tribe. What is he talking about? Oh, I hope it gets better. And so it came to pass that the Frontend tribe had to publish their web application. They had a web application. They wanted the world to see their work. To do this, they had to serve HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And they came to the Backend tribe, and they pleaded unto them, "Please pray to the Backend gods to serve our code, For you understand words like thread pools and message queues and Scala. Sorry. And ask the gods to serve our HTML and CSS and JavaScript. For we have coded the files and want the world to see them, but we have no gods to serve them for us. We need the backend gods to serve them for us. And the backend tribe prayed to the backend gods. And the backend gods answered, "Let it be so." And in their goodwill, they gave the front-end people a gift, a most wondrous gift. You can sit here, that's fine. It's really bad today, so I'm sorry. The presentation. Yeah, they'll explain later. And in their goodwill, they gave the front-end tribe a gift, a most wondrous gift, FTP. For the front-end tribe would put their HTML and CSS and JavaScript in the FTP, and lo and behold, it would be seen by everybody in the world. And the front-end tribe were happy, and all was well. I'm starting to get the idea. The back-end tribe are the back-end developers, and they have servers. The front-end tribe only has code. They do not control the servers. To make the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript be used, they have to put it in the servers that are controlled by the backend people. Okay. And so it came to pass, after a few months, that the backend tribe were not happy. They did not like their URLs ending in .html. They wanted them to end with nothing, because that is how the web looks cool. And they came to the backend tribe and they pleaded unto them, "Please pray to the backend gods, for you understand words like thread pools and message queues and Scala." And the backend tribe prayed. And the backend gods answered, "Let it be so." And in their goodwill, they gave the front-end people a gift, a most wondrous gift, URL rewriting. For with this gift, the front-end developers could do a whole lot of stuff besides enabling URLs without extensions. But they could not use the tool directly. For to use the tools, one would have to pray to the backend gods to make changes in the secret, sacred configuration files. You know, URL rewriting, you need an Apache or Nginx, and it has rules for URL rewriting. So you say, all the URLs that end without an extension, rewrite them to be with an extension. You have to write it in a configuration file. Who controls that configuration file? The front-end people? No. These are secret, sacred server configuration files. The back-end people control them. Again, it's a question of front-end people needing something and only the back-end people that can use that. And so each time the front-end people needed changes in URL rewriting, they would go to the back-end tribe and they would pray to the back-end gods to change the secret, sacred server configuration files. And the back-end gods would change it, and all was well in the land of the web. And in those days, Paul was sitting in his garden and contemplating ES6 modules. For those were exciting times, and everybody was smitten with ES6 modules, for they were the future of JavaScript modules. First of all, smitten is both in love and also a punch in the face or something, which makes sense because they're very similar. ES6 modules, for all you backend people, ES6 is the next version of JavaScript, which is ES5. ES5, and now next version of JavaScript is ES6, and it has a module system. Finally, JavaScript has a module system, and probably Paul was reading all about it. I'm not sure what this has to do with, but hey. And Paul was also smitten, and he read all he could about ES6 modules, and he could find nothing wrong with them, because that is how you are when you are in love. For he was smitten. But not everybody knew about ES6 modules. Everybody used hacky things like require.js and regular script source files to break apart their JavaScript code into manageable chunks. I remember the days when you had 50K of JavaScript code for your front end. You didn't need any more. Today it's like tens of megabytes of JavaScript code. You can't have that in one big file. You need a way to manage it and to break it apart into chunks, into modules, just like any other language has. And there are hacky ways to do that. Require just lots of script sources. ES6 modules is a standard way to fix all that, to make it standard. And so Paul left the land of code and bugs and stuff, and went unto the front-end tribe's village and preached about ES6 modules. And this is what he said: Lo, behold an ES6 module, for it is a simple thing. It is a JavaScript file with functions and variables and whatnot. And some of these functions and variables are exported, for they can be seen everywhere by anybody who uses it. And he bespoke even more. And whosoever wants to import a module should just write import and what they want to import and the name of the module they want to import. And verily it was a wonder to behold, for up to now the front-end people had to contend with ugly things like AMD and require.js. And as Paul went unto the front-end tribe people and showed them this wonder, they were not convinced. For they said, forsooth, do the browsers understand this ES6? No, they do not. Browsers don't understand ES6. Whosoever should explain it to them. And Paul said unto them, be patient, for the browsers will understand the new language eventually, for the standards committee has spoken, and ES6 is fixed in stone. And Paul also said, and in the meanwhile, I will give you tools like Babel and Tracer and ESNext to transpile this for you. Verily, you give unto them an ES6 file, and they spit out an ES5 file, a JavaScript file. So this is the way today people use ES6. They pass it through a transpiler. They write the code in ES6, they build it, turn it into ES5 code, and that is what the browser sees. And the most popular code, popular tool used today is Babel. Does anybody here use Babel to transpile? Great, good. Hopefully, like in a year, nobody will use Babel because all the browsers will understand this. But the front-end tribe were still not convinced, for they said, while if we have a module which we script source, and that module imports more modules, which import more modules, and so on very deeply. What if we have that? For the browser will go ahead and fetch each one in return. And forsooth, the browser is very slow in this regard. So we script source the top level module, and this imports two module, and this imports more, and yada, yada, yada. And in a regular JavaScript language, because the JavaScript modules tend to be very small, we will have hundreds of these files. Okay? And if the browser does a fetch for each one, browsers are very fast today, but each fetch is a latency. It's like hundreds of milliseconds to the server and back. Well, tens of milliseconds. This thing will take a long time. They're right. For although HTTP is a holy protocol, brought to us by the great prophet Lee, it is old, and it can fetch only one file at a time. And the browser will bring our main.js file, parse it, and then decide it will need to bring in the submodules. and it will parse it, and it will find it needs to bring in sub-modules, and it will do so for each and every one of our sub-modules, and the sun will go dark, and the stars will turn to dust while we wait. And Paul said, "Fear not, for I give unto you the tools Browserify and Webpack and JSPM." And they crawl the JavaScript file. And they crawl the JavaScript files, and they understand the imports and their relationships, and they bundle the code into a mega JavaScript bundle, which that is what you need to script source in the HTML. So as long as we're transpiling from ES6 to ES5, we can also bundle it into one big file. And if it's one big file, that's fine. There's no latency in bringing each file in return. Makes sense. And the front-end tribe went away happily and used ES6 modules. And they were smitten too. A month later, the front-end people returned to Paul in the cave and said, "Oh, Paul, for you have given us a great tool, and we use ES6 modules, and Babel, and Webpack, but we are still not happy." And Paul said, "What are you not happy about?" And they said, "Up to now, we have been making fun of the backend people, for they use Scala, and they have a build step which is long and arduous and painful, whereas we need only use the wondrous F5 key to rerun our change code. We just need to refresh the browser to see our code change. And now, alas, we too have a build step. And while it is not long and arduous and painful, it still makes our F5 key a little less wondrous." And Paul was silent, for he felt unto the front-end tribe, for he also liked making fun of the back-end people. And the people continued, "Also, each time we change one small file, and we have to rebuild the bundle, and that messes up caching. We changed only a file or two, but and when we put it in productions, our user needs to download the mega bundle again, and it is very voluminous and holds many megabytes and is slow to download. Our users say that they feel that when the page finishes loading, it is as if the sun has gone dark and the stars have turned to dust. Moreover, each HTML page has to import different JS files, but those JS files may import other files that are imported in another bundle. So now we have same code being downloaded again and again for different pages. Verily, this is a rat's nest. And even though rats are tasty, we do not want them in our code." And Paul was silent. And Paul understood the needs of the front-end developers. For even though he loved stirring the soil of code and bugs and stuff, he was also a software architect. And so he went back to his cave and contemplated the problem. And lo, it was a hard problem with no solution in sight. And he was smitten by frustration. And smitten as he was, this is the punch thing. And he was smitten as he was, he went to sleep. And Paul dreamt. And when he dreamt of an architecture, for he was an architecture never before heard of. In this architecture, the gods serving the bundles would be smart. When they serve a JS file, they will not do it blindly. Instead, they will parse the JavaScript file, understand the dependencies of the submodules, create a JavaScript module, and return it to the browser. This is the server doing it in runtime, not the build. And because this happens in the server, the wondrous F5 key will just work. No more build steps. Our front-end tribe can continue laughing at the back-end tribe with their Scala. Okay, so Paul is moving things from build to runtime. This is getting interesting. The question is, what more can we get by moving things from build time to a server that is built specifically for doing front-end stuff? But what about the other problems? Have we solved them? Well, no. Bundling is a nice hack, but it kills downloading. But because the same code is downloaded and again, and because it kills caching, And so he went back to his cave and contemplated the problem. And lo, it was still a hard problem with no solution in sight. And he was smitten by frustration. And smitten as he went to sleep. And Paul dreamt. And when he dreamt of a new thing. HTTP2. And he awoke. And he had no idea what the dream meant. But he was a learned man, so he delved deeply into the spec of HTTP2. HTTP2, are you familiar? HTTP2 is the next version of HTTP1. It has lots of goodies. Most modern browsers implement it, i.e. the new version, Chrome, Firefox, probably Opera, Safari. Probably IE 11 and downwards don't, but those are dying. And he awoke, and he had no idea what the dream meant. Oh, I said that. He already knew the inefficiencies of HTTP1 when it comes to many files, too many connections, too many requests in parallel, in serial. He learned that HTTP2 allows us to send requests and receive responses on the same connection and in parallel. So the browser requests the main.js file and reads it and figures out what the submodules are, which are submodule A and B. And because HTTP2 is multiplexing, it can bring the modules in parallel and parse them and bring the next set of layer files in the same request. That's much better. I don't bundle, and then the browser can ask for things in parallel. Each layer of dependencies will still be serial, but at least all the files in a layer will come parallel. So the number of requests is the depth of the dependency tree, dependency graph, but let's ignore that. And then he learned about HTTP2 push mode, and he was smitten by the beauty. He learned in HTTP2 push mode, a server can push files to the browser without the browser even asking for them. This is strange. So when the browser will request main.js, the server can read the JS, learn the hierarchy, and can push the whole bundle one by one, unbundled, even if the browser asks only for main.js, because the browser will, in a second, ask for them. The server, because it can understand JavaScript, anticipates the browser. This is crazy. I don't think any server can do that today. And why can this server do that? Because it is a server specifically designed for the needs of the front-end developer. This solves over-bundling, he thought, because I don't need to bundle. I just need to push all the resources forward when I get a JS file request, the JS file and all its dependencies. But what about caching? What if the browser already has these files? And he learned some more, and he delved deep into the spec, and he learned that HTTP push mode is compatible with caching. And so the browser can kill responses in flight and say, it's okay, I don't need it. Perfect. All our problems are solved with HTTP2. When we receive a file, we push all the dependent files, and if they're already cached, then we don't. No more bundling. And it was thus in an excited mood that Paul rushed to the Backend tribe and implored them to talk to the Backend gods about ES6 modules and parsing and caching. But the Backend tribes did not understand these words, for they knew only words like thread pools and message queues and Scala. Please, he tried again, I beseech upon all that is holy. It is important to my tribe. This time the Backend tribe answered. The Backend gods answered. Oh, piss off. We gave you your rewriting already. What is this JavaScript we are talking about? What is this nonsense? Backend people, they don't understand the needs of the front-end people. So obviously, yeah, they can give a little bit, but this is heavy-duty coding. Just piss off. Depressed, forlorn, Paul went back to the Frontend tribe and told them about his tribulations with the Backend gods. And there was much wailing and weeping and gnashing of the teeth. And Paul returned to his cave and asked himself, what if there were new gods? New gods who would understand words like JavaScript and Angular and DOM. Then if the gods understood this, then they can serve our JavaScript modules with HTTP2 push with caching. And with this thought, he went to sleep. And Paul thought of HTML and caching, for he knew that for the front-end developers, caching is all important, and that there are two kinds of browser caching. One in which the browser checks if the item is in the cache. The browser always checks if the item is in the cache, is still fresh, using last modified or etag headers. And the other, where the browser always assumed that the cached version is okay, using expires infinity. And he knew that the front-end tribe likes the second one, the infinity caching version, because it is much, much, much faster. Just to recap, because some of you may not be familiar, HTTP headers have a way to specify how the browser handles caching. So let's say I request a JavaScript file, doesn't matter, it can be HTML or whatever. I will request a file. The server returns one of two things. Let's say it returns an etag. Okay? It returns an etag with a number or whatever, a string. And the browser remembers the file in the cache and remembers that etag, the string. The next time it says, oh, I need the same file, what it does is it sends a request with the etag and say, has this file changed, this file with the etag? And the browser and the server returns and says, it's okay, it's the same version of the file. No need, I'm not giving it to you back because you already have it in the cache. Or it can say, oh yeah, it changed, here's the new file. But there's a request, there's an additional request. It's very fast because usually it doesn't return the file. Okay, it just returns a small header. But sometimes it is, and it's still a request, there's still latency. And you know, we in Ukraine and in Israel, we don't live in the US. Latency is a big thing. We have to go far to get our files. The second one is better. The second one, I say, I ask the server for a file. It returns and says, this file will expire on the year whatever, 2095. And the browser, next time it needs the file, it looks and says, oh, 2095. And doesn't even request the file from the server. That's best because I skip the additional request. And obviously, front-end people like the second caching because it is the fastest. And because the front-end tribe thought caching was all important, and because infinity caching is the best, they did crazy things, like for each release, rename the files and modify the script source to reflect the name change. And because every change means renaming the file, they could use infinity caching. So if we have main.js, but when I go to production it's main1.0.js, the next time I go to production it's main1.1.js, etc., then I can use infinity caching because the name of the file is always immutable is always equal to the content of the file. It is immutable. It will never change. This will always mean the same content. Okay. But it was manual and error-prone and hackish as hell. But what if? What if the gods did these things automatically? What if the gods understood HTML, for they could attach the modification time of the file to the URL and serve it from there? So the browser would change this HTML into this HTML. And verily do it unto the CSS and the images. And so yet another speed increase in serving the pages. Is this enough value for the backend gods? So if the server can understand it, it can do it automatically. It can parse the HTML, do the changes, and send it. And it was thus in an excited mood that Paul rushed to the Backend tribe and implored them to talk to the Backend gods about HTML and infinity caching. But the Backend tribe did not understand these words, for they understood words like thread pools and message queues and Scala. Please, he tried again, I beseech upon thee all that is holy. It is important to my tribe. And the Backend gods answered, oh, piss off. We gave you your writing already. What is this infinity caching you are talking about? What is this nonsense? Depressed and forlorn, Paul went back to the Frontend tribe and told them about the tribulations with the Backend gods. And there was much weeping and much wailing and much gnashing of the teeth. Gnashing is how you do this. And Paul returned to his cave and asked himself, maybe the Backend tribe is wrong. Maybe our reliance on the old gods is wrong. And he finally understood. He was on a mission from gods, a mission to understand how to solve the problem of reliance on the old gods. And Paul continued thinking, and he thought more about this HTML. He thought about how HTML was served in these days of single-page applications. How do single-page applications work? First, the browser requests the HTML from the server and reads it, which reads it from the file system, returns it to the browser. The HTML is bare without any data. It has no data. But in it, there are AJAX calls to the various microservices in the backend. Those microservices return a JSON, which causes the HTML to be filled with data. And so the page is viewed only after another round trip to the server. This one round trip, second round trip. And so also, the call to the services can be done multiple times to return the data or bring more or even update it. So this is a typical single-page application. The first page rendering needs 2 hops. But what if we could render the HTML, the whole HTML, with the data from the server? Then we could call the service from the server that's doing the rendering and remove the need for that additional round trip. It would look like this. First, the browser requests the HTML from the server, same, which reads it from the file system, but before returning it to the browser, gives it to some code, some rendering code, which calls the service in the backend. Not here, to be filled with data and returned to the user. And so the page is viewed only after the round trip is saved. And this round trip is very slow because this is from the user to the server. This round trip is on the order of milliseconds because these 2 servers are next to each other. And the browser can continue doing the AJAX calls to update the data, etc., etc. We still need that. And the front end, but we all know that to write the rendering code on the server, you must understand the language of Scala. And the front-end people do not understand these words. Moreover, the same code needs to be written here and here, because this is very, very similar code. This fills the data, this fills the HTML with data, and this fills the HTML with data. But what if the gods could not only understand JavaScript and understand HTML, they could also execute JavaScript. Then we can use this to write the server code in JavaScript, and we would not need to understand Scala. And we could use the same code for the front end and the back end. For it would be a wondrous thing to share code between the front end and the back end. And this is important, because then we could write this code in JavaScript using the same code base as this code. So where were we? But would all code be written in JavaScript? Well, I hope so, but it doesn't have to be. Oh no, only front-end code that just happens to need to run in the backend. For the backend tribe is old and powerful and does wondrous things in the backend using stuff like thread pools and message queues and Scala. But he knew, wait, I missed something? No. But he knew that if he would go to the backend tribe with these ideas, they would ignore him. They would say, oh, piss off, we gave you your early writing. What is this server-side rendering you are talking about? What is this nonsense? But what if? What if there were new gods? Gods who would understand words like JavaScript and Angular and DOM. Then we could pray to them and would be answered with things like server-side rendering of HTML. And so Paul finally understood, and he had a vision. He now understood that the old gods were not enough anymore, and decided maybe it was time to leave the old gods be and go and search for younger, newer gods. And so he roamed the earth. And he came upon the land of Nod. And in the land of Nod he talked to the people. And they were a friendly people. And they understood words. Really, when you write in Node, this is how you look like. Believe I know. And they understood words like message queues. Yes, they are backend. But they also understood JavaScript. And Paul walked unto their gods and explained the conundrums. And the Node gods said, hey, great idea. Let it be so. You can now pray to us, for we speak in the holy language of JavaScript, as was laid down by the prophet Brendan Ike. And what you pray for, we will do. And happily, Paul went back to his cave and prayed to the new gods to allow them to serve JavaScript intelligently by transpiling the ES6, modifying the result, serving ES6 modules using HTTP push mode with caching, and who knows what else. And allow them to do the same with CSS, because the same problem we have in JavaScript, we have in CSS, bundling and caching and all that stuff. And to finally allow them to serve HTML intelligently by rewriting resources for infinity expiring, rendering HTML using server-side JavaScript code, and caching resources using HTTP2 push mode with caching. This is where I need the beer. And who knows what else. Oops. For the new gods understood HTML and CSS and JavaScript and could do all these things. And so it was. And the front-end tribe app and the front-end app was now easier to understand, easier to develop, and faster to load. And the front-end tribe, the front-end tribe were now happy. They were a young tribe, but full of energy and passion. And they were happy at last. For now, they need not pray to the old gods, which only understood things like thread pools and message queues and Scala. They could now pray to the new gods, who understood things like JavaScript and Angular and DOM. Seriously though, it's not that the Bedouin really did visit me. What if we could have a server, probably written in Node, because JavaScript is a natural language, that did things, not backend things, not writing to the database and reading from the database and doing all those message queuing things and sending emails. That is backend stuff. Backend people know how to do these things better than the front-end people. That is why they are backend people. But what if we had a server that is for the needs of the front-end people? Yes, the front-end people write things in the browser, but there is no reason whatsoever that they should not write things in the server. The fact that they are front-end people does not mean that they do not have back-end needs. And this is a small inkling of what those needs are. There are more. Stuff like, I have all these microservices. You've heard about the idea of microservices, where it's not one big service, it's lots and lots of services. And I need an AJAX call, but the AJAX call needs to return lots of information from all those services. Maybe some of you have have found out this problem. So what they do now is they wait for a backend developer to write a service that aggregates all of this. But if they could have their own server, they need not do it. They could do the aggregation themselves. You could do the aggregation yourself. I could do the aggregation myself. Um, and that is the vision. And hopefully, in the following year, we have this prototype. We're thinking about it. Hopefully, in 2016, we'll open source it and publish it. So, thank you very much. This is my Twitter handle. Thank you. Questions? Okay. Thank you very much.